I mean, my great-grandparents, about 100 years ago, I think, they attended universities in Japan.
Oh, really?
So, yes, and they would be the founders of the first generation of like these factories in Korea after the unification. I think I would rather have my kids follow the paths of their grandparents and their great-grandparents rather than their own dad.
Which is the path of security and safety.
Exactly.
Which is what everybody wants for their kids, right?
I've had my own share of torturing their own self.
Sure.
Practicing the same old instrument. I have more than 200 guitars. And I have my share of practicing time in my lifetime. And, well, for a person's sake, in a way, there were time to time when you feel really lonely. Being all alone in this room with guitars and amplifiers and demos to be worked on. Well, from time to time, it can be harsh.
Yeah.
So I would rather have my kids have it easier, I guess.
Yeah, and
unless
I guess,
they really want to do it.
You know, before you did Next and those other projects, there was always that time where you didn't know whether you were going to be a popular musician or a guy doing studio work, living in a one-room apartment somewhere at the age of 40, right?
Right.
Fortunately, you made the popular musician side of things, but there must have been many years of stress in there, right?
Yes.
How old were you when you started and decided you were going to be a professional musician? Finished high school, and then what did you do?
Finished high school, and right afterwards, we would form a band called The Bank, and it was a trio. But at the time, trios performing instrumentals were not what the people really wanted at the time. I was trying to aim at becoming the Joe Satriani of Korea, and performing guitar instrumentals in front of crowds. Later on, I find out that, hey, we need a vocalist and we need a band.
Yeah.
So that's when we decided to make a band called Downtown. And yes, we wanted to make these songs.
How old were you?
1920.
1920.
About, I think about that.
Your dad's scared to death.
Oh, yes. I was praying, please, do not make him, become a professional musician. And yes, and actually, I was really lucky. The reason why I say this is because all of the members who were the founders of the band Downtown have now become important people in the music industry in Korea today.
Really?
The bass player Chung Han-jung, he had become the bassist for Shinawi, which is obviously what you could consider like the Deep Purple or Led Zeppelin of Korea in the market. And now he's like the president of his own, like entertainment company. And the drummer, Chang Hyun Lee, he had been one of the most popular songwriters of the Korean dance music scene for more than a decade now. And Haesung Chung, Chun Hae-sung, he is like one of the most popular songwriters in the entire market today.
Wow.
So he's been writing songs for Yoon Do-yeon and Lee Seung-chul. And if you would find their most popular ballads recently, in the recent 10 years or so, you would find this name really often. So I was really lucky to have been, performing with them in our amateur days.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the reasons why we all had become what we are today. So yeah, we were really working hard. Aiming at our goals,
Some very talented people to get started with.
Right.
Huh?
So we would never have guessed what we would become later on.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't find that many bands having all of the members become somebody special in the scene that often. So,
Not very often, no.
Right.
I hear that when you were young, you even would call up guitarists who you were impressed with and fascinated with, and you would just ask them for advice?
Right.
Is that right?
Yes. Well, One of those people were Scott, not Ian of Antwerp.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not.
How'd you get his phone number?
Well, it was really crazy. What I did was back in 1991, I got this translating job from radio stations and magazine companies here in Korea, and I later found out that there were various ways of getting, artists' home phone numbers. And one of those ways was to call up the Hollywood Guitar Center and ask for the guitar department and just say, hey, I'm somebody from South Korea, and make it sound like it's from Mars. And they would be like, huh? You serious, dude? And yes, I'm really serious. And I have a question. I want to ask Scott, not Ian, how he downpicks so hard, so harshly, and it looks so awesome. And I would just try to become friends, like phone pals, with workers of this guitar department at the Guitar Center in Hollywood back at the time.
Okay.
I know it's really crazy.
Yeah, and we have to explain. Guitar Center is a guitar shop.
Right, guitar department store.
In California, there's many of them in California.
Yes, all over the States. Yes.
But obviously the biggest one, where all the stars go, is the Guitar Center in Hollywood. So you would call up there, and they would, of course, be regular customers.
Right.
And you would
actually workers of the guitar department there.
Right, but those artists were regular customers of the workers there.
Yes.
So you would get to know the workers and ask them for the phone number.
So yes, I think 100만 won is like $1,000,000 at the time per month for phone calls, for long distance phone calls. And I would call the shops up and ask for phone numbers of Scott, not Ian, like Richie Kotzen, Paul Gilbert, Joe Satriani, and guess what? They told me.
They would give them to you.
Yes. So later on,
didn't Joe Satriani answer the phone and go, how'd you get my phone number?
Yes, that's what they would all ask. But as soon as they hear, hey, this is South Korea, Seoul, Korea, and they were like, oh, are you serious? Yes. It's 4 a.m. And
because you wanted to call at a time they were awake.
Right.
So you call at 4 a.m.
And hey, I have a question. How did you play that lick at like the 80% part of Surfing with the Alien to Joe Satriani?
Yeah.
How did you play that part of down picking? And why don't you use any frets after the 12th fret to Scott, not Ian?
and then they would be so preoccupied by the question and where the